Good. All right. Hello, everyone. We are now beginning. Well, just one second. Let me just see. Let me just cut this off 1 second. I don't think that this will. Oh, very good. All right. Good. That's all right. Good. Good. All right. Now we're resuming where we left off yesterday. First of all, let us give charity. Let's give charity. Let's start the day off with Sion b'mishpat tepora v'tzaveh b'tzedakah. The Jewish people are only redeemed with tzedakah. We just learned that over here. Really? Where did we learn that? Where do we learn that? Over here. Where do we learn that? Anyway, we just learned that the other day. Okay, so the Jewish people will be redeemed through charity. Here it is. Here it is. Tzedakah terumam goy. It says the Jewish people. It says Ein Yisrael. Oh, here we go. Ein Yisrael nigolim ela b'tzedakah. The Jewish people are not redeemed and will not be redeemed unless they give charity, which the Jewish people are. That's part of their nature. We see how much the Jews have contributed to the world. Tremendous amounts that the Jews always like to contribute with music and art and such. And sometimes maybe they contribute things that are not exactly as positive as they could be, but okay, the movie industry, etc. But they do contribute. Jewish people like to give. They like to give. Maybe we can say that they like to give even more than they like to receive. Jewish like to, or maybe it's equal, but they certainly like to give. But the give words in the proper way and when it should be given according to the Torah, to give to poor people, to give to clothe the poor, to feed the hungry, is a necessary thing. Meanwhile, and there's no one that's poor here in the house, in my house, or hungry over here, and therefore let's give charity, and we'll give this charity to people that need it. Here we go. Now, let's resume where we were learning. We're learning now about the names of the Jewish people, the names, and it's a big thing. That's the whole name of this book. In English, it's called Exodus, but in Hebrew, it's called Shmot, the names. It's the book of names. Shmot, that's the name of it. And it begins with these are the names of the Jewish people that went into Egypt. The names. So names are somehow or other tremendously important about the whole idea of going into Egypt. And of course, going into Egypt, at least what we're learning over here, is a basic feature in Judaism that they're in exile. The Jewish people began in exile. So exile is somehow or other a basic integral part of Jewish history and identity, and maybe the whole purpose that they're in this world is because of the exile, and to know what to do with the exile, to go out of exile. Okay, basically, this whole world is exile. The whole world is exile. The soul, before it comes into the body, is basking in the oneness of God. And what that means, I don't know because I'm in my body. But before my soul was in my body, so the soul was basking in the oneness of God. There we go. And feeling truth, feeling ultimate truth, feeling ultimate, I want to call it pleasure, oneness, unity, consciousness. There's all sorts of different levels of this, more and more and more of God's oneness and how God is. Now in this world, we can't, it seems ridiculous to say we're being created. God is creating us. It makes no sense. But in the upper worlds, not only does it make sense, but that's all the whole world, upper worlds are about. Everyone feels that they're being created, from nothing, that everything is a big miracle. So that's, but being in this world, the soul is put into this world. That's putting the soul into exile. The soul, before it went into this world, it was completely one with truth. And when it comes into this world, the world is called the world of lies. So that's the soul coming into the body. That's already exile. And it says it's even a tremendous pain and difficulty for the soul to come into the body and to stay in the body. For the soul to stay in the body. And finally, and worst of all, it gets used to it. So not only is it an exile, it's in a double exile. The soul is in the body. Not only does it forget the upper worlds, but it thinks that this is the only world. But this is the only world that there is. Doesn't have even a sense that there's something other than this world. So that's the idea of exile. So the Jewish people are here in order to change that. That's why the Jewish people are here. That's the whole story of the Bible, that God created a world and he put man in it. And the reason is, surprisingly, that in fact, this world is the highest of all. Even though it seems, and it obviously is the lowest of all. It's a world of lies and etc. Like I just explained. It's a big Exile to be put into here. But the fact is that this world is something incredibly higher than all the upper worlds. And that's the whole idea of why the Torah was given here and the commandments are here. And that's to be redeemed, that the Jewish people will be released. Redemption doesn't mean that all the Jewish people just float up into heaven and leave everybody down here in this quagmire of the world, like in the flood, in Noah's flood. So everybody just died. What do we care? No. The Jewish people are here in order to transform the whole entire world to something that's higher than all of the upper worlds. We have no idea what that means. Okay, so it says, let's go. Here we go. Now we can understand what it says in the Zohar. We did this a little bit yesterday, but we'll continue to. That's what it says in the Zohar. Hello?
Hello?
Yes. You okay? Good, Dovey?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Good morning. Good morning.
Morning.
All right, that's what it says in the Zohar. So what are we here in the world for? We're here to fix up the world. We're to fix up the world and reveal why God created the world. The world is not just a punishment, and it's not just this maze that you have to go through in order to get into heaven. The soul is waiting to come into this world. It wants to come into this world very deep. In the essence of the soul, it wants to, even though it's a terrible torture, but it wants to come to this world to reveal the treasures in this world. To reveal the treasures in this world. Something like digging for gold. You know, digging for diamonds. You have to go into the world, and then you reveal the true treasures of every single moment of this world. Every single time you do a commandment, whatever, that's infinite. That's the whole secret of the raising of the dead. Okay, now so we're here, this world, in order to fix it. So the Rebbe explained before that the world is created by God's speech, and it's fixed up by God's speech. The world is created by God's speech. That's the 10 utterances that God used to create the world. Let there be light, let there be firmament. And it's fixed up by speech, and that's the Torah. And the Torah, especially the oral Torah, especially the Mishnah, and the laws that come out from the rabbis, that's what fixes up the world. Anything other than that just confuses everything, just makes everything confused. So now we can understand what it says in the Zohar, that the whole Torah and the commandments is only to fix up the secret of God's name. There's 7 names of God which are not supposed to be wiped out. We learned this a little bit, but I want to go over it. Hainu Shem El, the name of God, which is El. We don't say it, we say Kale. That's God's kindness. Well, in order that there should be a revelation in this world of God himself, the essence of God, and God is above all of these attributes of God, as Iuklal, Bamidas HaChesed, in other words, in order to reveal the essential importance of this physical world that's higher than the spiritual worlds. The spiritual worlds are an expression of God's qualities, like we said before, the sphirot of God, God's power, that's like the angel Gabriel, God's kindness, that's the angel Michael, and then above that, there's levels which are above that. There's Chesed, there's Gevura, that's in the world of Atzilus, the world of Bria, these different. And these are all expressions of aspects of God. But the essence of God that's creating this whole entire business can only be found in this physical world. But in order to make it revealed in this physical world, it has to come through the upper worlds. It has to come through these various names of God. And there are, for instance, that's all the words and the letters of the Torah, but they all stem from the different names, the different aspects of God. And this is what all the Kabbalistic books are written about, because the upper worlds are more real than this world is, but we just don't know it. And that's what the Kabbalistic books, they talk about, that how unreal this world is compared to the upper worlds, but how infinitely real this world is compared to the essence of God. That this world is what rose up in God's mind in the beginning. But in order to have a little appreciation of that, we have to have at least a little bit of an appreciation of the fact that this world is not really real. It's a toned down reality How do you say that? It's just like what do you want to call it? Like a shadow of a shadow of a shadow, or a picture of a picture of a picture of a picture of reality, and that's where we're living now. That's what it means. What's between the essence of God and us? All these upper worlds. That's like the names of God. That's God's aspects. It comes through. So God's aspects of His personality, they come through these names. In order that there should be in this kindness of God in the world, it can only come from names, Ve'ha'ora, and rays of God, Ba'oma, ordinary sort of rays of God, what do you call it, the echoes or whatever you want to call it of God, pictures. And Vehu B'chinas Shem El, that's the name of God, which is the name El. Like it's known that there is no comparison between the name of a person and the person himself. Let me make this bigger. It's getting small over here. There is no comparison between the name of a person and the person himself. So when we're praying, for instance, in the morning, and we say in our prayers, we call God by these different names, Baruch Atah Hashem and Elokim and El. We call God El. We call the God the Shaddai. All these different names of God. What we're referring to is higher levels of reality than our reality that's here in this world, or in more, I don't know how do you say, practical terms, we're talking about getting closer to the Creator, revealing the Creator in the creation. Creation of the good. And like I said so many times before, but I'm giving these examples. I don't know how accurate they are, but you find like a picture in your house and you're just about to throw it in the trash, and someone says, "What are you doing? What are you throwing that picture away for? It's a nice picture. I'll put it in my house." I'm gonna take it. Who cares? It's just messing on my house. The guy takes it. He says, "Look at it. Look what's written in the corner. Rembrandt." Says, "It's probably just some guy copied Rembrandt. He doesn't even know around." Let me take it to an expert. He takes it to an expert and says, "This is a genuine Rembrandt. This picture is worth at least half a billion dollars, right? A genuine Rembrandt. What are you going to get at them? $500 million for this thing. I was going to throw it away. I was going to use it for a placemat on my table." And just because the name is on it, because the name of the thing is on it, it shows who the author is. The same thing is the world. The world, the names of God are showing who is the author of the world. Suddenly the world becomes tremendously valuable, precious. And that's what it means to fix up God's names. To reveal the names of God are not like the names of a person. Names of a person. They refer to God, but they only refer to God. The name Rembrandt is not Rembrandt, is not the person. Right? The person was a person. He could have changed the name from Rembrandt to Goldstein if he wanted to. Right? With then the name Goldstein, that would represent who the person is. So God decided that He wanted, but nevertheless, Rembrandt is a different name. When you think about Rembrandt, you're not thinking about Bolton, right? You have a picture that's written on the corner of Tuvia Bolton. It's worth maybe $5. Rembrandt is worth $500 million. It's a totally different thing. Here we have God's names are not like any other names because they refer to God. They are conduits. They're pipelines through which the essence of God comes. Okay, so it says the world is built, the whole world is built from God's kindness, and God's kindness is referred to and evoked, if you want to call it, by the name El. But it's only just the name of God alone. And that's the name El. Like it's known that there's no comparison between the name of a person and the person himself. The person himself is like you can take the name Rembrandt and you can tear it up and do nothing to it. But if you try to tear up Rembrandt, they'll take you to the police. Rembrandt himself, or even his picture, but that's his energy that he put into the picture. The Kain Shem Elokim, also the name Elokim is in Gevura. That's God's power, indicates. Therefore, in order to draw these names down, to fix them up, and to put these aspects of God in His names, liot olam chesed yiboneh, so that we feel God's kindness in the world. Hu al yedei Torah v'mitzvot. It's by means of the Torah and the commandments, because the Torah and the commandments that touches on God's essence. That comes from God's essence. There's different types of letters. There's different types of letters. The world is created from letters, and Torah and commandments are also from letters, but it's different types of letters. When God spoke on Mount Sinai, the whole world like evaporated temporarily. The letters of the Torah are infinitely more real. They refer much more to the Creator, that they're connected to the essence of the Creator. when a person does a commandment, so he connects the world, the physical commandment that he does, with the essence of the Creator. This draws down this particular name of God into the world. But the main thing is, Latkana Raza Shemei, this is in order to, well, the main thing is to fix up the secret of God's name, to draw from what's called God's big name. That this is what's called Ein Sof, the essence of God, the creator, and even higher than the creator, the reason for the creation. The reason why God, in his essence, decided that he wanted to have all these levels and worlds and angels and Sphirot and revelations and things like that. The only reason was for this physical world. And when this physical world is the way it's supposed to be, then that touches on God's essence. And that's what's called God's big name. God's big name means the possibility that God can be brought into a name at all. That's what's called God's great name. That's essence of Ein Sof. Okay, you do it like it's known. There's what's called the unification of the names of Yud Kei Vav Kei and Aleph Daled Nun Yud. Sometimes there are Sephardic Sidurim, and they have the Sephardic Jews, especially. They were a lot of very, very great Kabbalists, and it was made advertised to the people that Kabbalah was a practical thing. It was a practical thing. And it was also advertised to the people that not everybody had the talent to be a Kabbalist. By Sephardic Jews especially, Kabbalah was a holy thing. Now they have Kabbalah as just like a social thing, and what is it? How do they call it? Coaching. It's an improvement, self-improvement. Taking the ideas of Kabbalah. That's not Kabbalah. Kabbalah means attaching yourself to aspects of God. Only people that were really God-fearing people, that Kabbalah helped them do the commandments and brought them to be deeper and more sincere in their connection to God, the commandments and the Torah, etc. So you see, there are some Sephardic Sidurim by the Kabbalah, especially like in Morocco, Iraq. There were these, Tunisia, there was Chaim Tayyib, there were these tremendous tzaddikim, and the simple people knew about it, right? It was in those countries until, I don't know, about 100 years ago, something like that. There was no such thing as a non-religious Jew. There was no such thing as a religious Jew. Every Jew did all the commandments. It wasn't said, what are we, a religious Jew? They didn't ever heard of it. They were completely taken by surprise when, like, the Zionists came in and they brought them to Israel. So in Yemen, right, there were these big tzaddikim. Everybody knew when they brought them to Israel, and they saw non-religious Jews. They didn't know what type of, they thought these were religious Jews. They just didn't keep Shabbat because Israel is more holy. They didn't understand what's going on. So there are Sidurim, prayer books and when it says every blessing, it says Baruch Atah Hashem. They have Aleph Daled Nun Yud, and they have the name Yud Kei Vav Kei inside of it, written inside. That's unifying Adonai, that's the aspect of the lowest aspect of God, and Yud Kei Vav Kei, that's the highest aspect of God. that's two names of God, but this is the name of the essence of God, so to speak. It points on the essence, and this is the name of God through which God creates the world. Shehu Amshachah, this is drawing down the name of Yud Kei Vav Kei, which that's called surrounding all the worlds, above any world, above any creation, to draw the essence of God, the creator, into the name Adoni, which that's the creation. That's what's called Mamalik Holmi. How God fills the worlds, all the spiritual worlds, and etc. By means of the Torah and the commandments, the Torah and the commandments reach higher than all the spiritual levels and the spiritual worlds, and all these names of God. That's just names. That's just aspects of God. The Torah and the commandments, that comes from the essence of God. This is drawing down from God's, what's called his great name, Shmo HaGadol. Like we said before, Meshubachim for Adead Shmo HaGadol, God's great name. We say this in the Baruch Shamar, a blessing. By means of this, we fix up the secret of God's name, namely that God created a world and that he wants us to fix it up. So he created all these spiritual worlds in the middle so that we can appreciate God more and more and go out of our little physical awareness of what reality is and start to realize that there's bigger reality than our reality, spiritual. And from that, we can conclude that maybe there's some greater reality than the spiritual reality. And then you start to realize that there's higher spiritual realities that make the reality below it like nothing. That's these worlds of Yetzirah and Bria and Atzilut. But God is creating them all, and the essence of God can only be reached by Torah and commandments in this physical world. And that fixes up all of the names it just justifies all of God's efforts, if you want to call it, to make all these spiritual worlds. He made it only in order that we should know and appreciate him when we do the commandments, his commandments. That fixes up what's called the secret of God's name. That there should be drawn down in this world, this is what's called God's great name, in all of the other names of God, and all the other aspects of God. So the essence of God should draw down even in the spiritual worlds. The spiritual worlds also need to be fixed up. That was the whole story of God creating man and putting him into Gan Eden. Gan Eden is heaven. It was heaven on earth. The highest levels of God were revealed in the world, and Adam came to fix that up. That's what it says, Rev. That's what it's written in the beginning of Reish Parshas, in the beginning of Erel Avram. That's next week's Torah portion. It says, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, I appeared to them, Ushmi Hashem, but my name, the name of Yud Kei Vav Kei, I did not make known to them. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, God spoke to them, but he did not let connect to them from God's essence name. Why? Because Shalom Nitnu a Torah lamp, because God didn't give them the Torah. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, it says they did the whole Torah before it was given, but it wasn't they did it, but it wasn't that God gave it to them. In other words, they approached the essence of God, but the essence of God cannot be achieved by human means. Human beings can make a vessel for it, but God himself gave the Torah to the Jewish people. So Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, it says, God said, I appeared to them, but I did not give them my essence name. Ushmi Hashem, the name essence, I did not give to them. In other words, I did not reveal my essence to Abraham, because the essence of God can only be revealed, Yigil Hashem Avaya, that the revelation of the essence of God, which that's called God's great name, is only by means of the giving of the Torah. That's only when God gave the Torah. And that's after they were in Egypt. That's the idea of Kerav Tunnel, Malkeinu Lishim Hagadol. That's what it means that God, this is what we say this right before Shema Yisrael. We say, God, you brought us close to your great name. What is your great name? Your great name, your essence. When was that? When God gave the Torah. Because in order that this, what's called God's great name, God's essence, is only by means of the Jewish people, and only by means of the Jewish people doing and learning the Torah. That's why it's forbidden, really, for a non-Jew to learn like a Talmud. And there's those people who gave the South Koreans Talmuds or something. It's not a good thing that they did. They didn't do a good thing, because the non-Jews are forbidden to learn Talmud. Non-Jews are not allowed to learn Torah for the sake of learning Torah. They can learn Torah in order to know what to do their 7 Noahide commandments, not to steal, not to kill, not to this, that they can learn. But for the sake of the learning the Torah, they're not allowed to do. Just like a non-Jew is not allowed to keep Shabbat. Why not? What's wrong with that? Why? Because the Torah and Shabbat, they indicate on the reason for God creating the world. The reason God made a world with all these changes in it and all these details in it, like the Talmud has all these details, and like Shabbat has all these details. And the non-Jews are not connected to all the details of God. They're connected to making this world a good place. To make this world a good place for God to reveal himself in. But the Jewish people, they're connected to revealing God in the world. And that can only be done by the Torah and the commandments and the Jews. That's what it's written. That's what it says, that God will never leave his people. Why? Because of his great name. It's written in Yehoshua, the book of Joshua. What can you do to God's great name? That's why it says that the Jewish people are eternal, because the Jewish people are connected to the creator of the world, not to the spiritual and not to the physical. spiritual changes, physical changes, but God's essence never changes, and that's where the Jews are connected to. But they activate this connection when they do the Torah and the commandments. Because there are three, how do you say, binds, three unifications, three knots. Kesher means a knot, K-N-O-T. There are three binds. What's a good word for it? Three unifications. Three unifications are attached one to the other. The Jewish people are unified with the Torah, and the Torah is unified with God. So to speak, the Jewish people are on the bottom, and God is on the top, and the Torah unifies them both together. If so, there's only two connections. The Jewish people are connected to the Torah, and the Torah is connected to God. What does it mean there's three? So it says, well, the fact of the matter is, David HaMelech hayam mechaber Torah shalamayla, that he would attach the Torah with God. So we have the Jews are on below the Torah, they receive from the Torah. David HaMelech showed that the Jews are above the Torah. The Jews, by learning the Torah properly, they could attach the Torah with God. That explains why that if a Jew transgresses the whole Torah, God forbid, is that if he just returns to God, that God will wipe out all of his sins. Because the Jews in that way are higher than the Torah. King David showed it. King David is the Moshiach. He'll show that the essence of the Jews is higher even than the Torah. The Torah is connected to the essence of God. And somehow the Jews are higher than that. What that means, who knows? But that's the fact. That God, it says he brings down, the Jewish people bring God down into the Torah. This is the joining of Shmo HaGadol. This is what's called, we have the power to draw God's great name into Chachma, into the Torah, into the Torah. So it's like a two-way street. The Torah gives us power, and we give the Torah power. When we give that's what it means, the three attachments. That's what it means. So to speak, the Jewish people go in the place of God. The Jewish people. In the place of God. That's what it means. We're the sons of God. The Jewish people are the sons of God. God can have a son. How can God have a son? Doesn't make any sense. That's right. Doesn't make any sense. It's above. It's attached in the essence of God. Now we're going back to what we said in the beginning. That's this whole book of the book of Exodus. In English, it's called Exodus, but in Hebrew, it's called Shemot, the names. This is the first chapter of the book of names. Exodus, name Shemot. The first chapter, and the first chapter of that, the first is called Shemot. That's what we're reading this week. In Chabad also, names. The whole thing is only to fix up these names of God. The names of God. That's what it means. Elu Shemot Bnei Yisrael, Shemot Mamish. Really the names of God, all these 7 names of God, and they're also hinted at in the names of the tribes. We'll see in a second. Like what it says, Vayaz David Shem, like it says that King David made a name for himself. What does it mean, a name? He fixed up God's name by King David's self-sacrifice and his being in the world and suffering all of the trials and tribulations and disappointments and frustrations and threats and of this world, and nevertheless remaining clinging to God, is by means of this. He fixed up the bad, all these frustrations, he fixed it up. Or he gave us the power to fix it up. That's what it says in the Zohar. It says, what did King David do? He made a name. He made it the Avid Shmai Kadisha, that he fixed up God's great name. Shehim Shich Bechinas Gilui. He revealed the name of God below. La'amshich Orein Sof, to draw down godliness into what's called God's Chachma Eloah, God's upper wisdom. He drew godliness into the Torah. So to speak, he made the Torah holy in this world, so that the Torah would be applicable to every situation that there is in the world, to reveal godliness. That's what's called he drew God into godliness, from the level of the highest level of godliness, the Yud of God's name. That's what means. He fixed up God's name. That's the Yud of God's name. God's name has 4 letters in it, right? Yud, and then Hey, and then Vav and Hey. So the Yud of God's name, that's like the highest level of God's name. That's King David drew that down into the Torah, and from the Torah into the world. The Hey of God's name, that's the last Hey of God's name, Yud and then Hey and then Vav Hey. That's God's speech. It says the Ruach Piv, the breath of God's speech. That's the last Hey of God's name. He drew this down, the entirety of God's name, into the physical world. Like it says in Agiras HaKodesh, in the Tanya, the Kachu Pirish Shmot, that's what it means, the names of the Jewish people. The names of Bnei Israel, the Bnei Israel, they draw down the revelation of God's name into the world. That's us, that's me and you. Like it says, to fix up the secret of God's name. So there's all these movements in the world, tikkun olam, to fix up the world. Well, the only way you can fix up the world is by fixing up the world's connection to God. And that can only be done through Torah and the commandments. But the Torah and the commandments have to be done also with the proper attitude. And that's what we're learning about over here, how important the Jewish people are. That's what it means. Meshubach Ariyad Shmo Agadol. Great, God's great name. We talked about that before. Let's do this. Usually we don't, but let's do it. The parentheses. Ubapratos, let's talk about the. So what? That's what it means. That these are the names of the Jewish people that went into Egypt, drawing down the essence of God, like King David, drawing down the essence of God into this terrible, awful, confusing, false world. Because the world is made by God. God made the world, and God put us into this world. He put us into the soul, into the body, precisely this, in order to fix up God's names. Those are the names by which God creates the world. And God put the Jewish people, first of all, he put Adam into the world to improve it. And Adam didn't do it, so came along Abraham 2,000 years later, and he started this again to do the work of Adam. It's a long, hard job. Abraham was like 4,000 years ago. We've been working since then, fixing up the world little by little. What does it mean, fixing up the world? It means drawing godliness into the world, and that's done by self-sacrifice, by learning Torah and doing the commandments, and not thinking about yourself, thinking about the Creator, thinking about your job. Like any good worker, right? A good doctor, when he's making an operation, doesn't think about himself. Right? Somebody in sports, he's not thinking about his fans in the crowd, who's watching him. He's thinking about succeeding. Somebody who's in music, he's thinking about the music. He's not thinking about anything else. The same thing, the Jewish people, they have to think only about this job, fixing up the world, to make God revealed in the world. That's what they're supposed to be thinking about. So that's what the Jews went into Egypt for, because that's the whole essence of the Jewish people, is to fix up the world. So Yaakov and his sons, they went into the world to fix up God's name. That's why this whole book is called the Book of Names. Yaakov and his 12 sons, that's the tribes, that the source comes from Atzilus, and the 10 Sfirot of Atzilus, that these are the upper names of God, like it's known. There's a book called Pri Eitz Chaim. It's another book of the Arizal's wisdom. Eich Yichud, how to unify God in his Shekhinah. Shekhinah means God in the world, to make God more in the world. Shekhinah is God's dwelling in the world. That's called Yichud. That's called the unity of Yaakov and Rachel. Or sometimes it's called the unity of Yisrael. Yisrael is also Yaakov and Rachel. This is already Kabbalistic stuff, but we're touching on it because the whole idea of Kabbalah is to show how godly the world is. And how God connects, so to speak, his essence to the world. There's nothing except for God, but there's all these different levels of godliness. Yaakov, Yichud Hashem Ba'adni. That's the unification of Yud Ke Vav Ke and the name Adni. Because the source of Yaakov, Jacob, that comes from the essence name of God, Yud Ke Vav Ke. And the source of Rachel, Rachel, that comes from the name Aleph Daled Nud Yud. Therefore, Knesset Yisrael, the Jewish people, they're compared to Rachel, like it says, Rachel Lifnei Gozazel, like it says, like a sheep. Rachel means a sheep, like a sheep before the shearers. The Jewish people in exile, they're called like a sheep that are being sheared, that they're quiet. So that's aspects of God being brought into the world. That's what it means that they went into Egypt. Also, the 12 tribes, they correspond to the 12 different tzirufi, combinations of God's name. That corresponds to the 12 months of the year and the 12 hours of the day. It says the 12 hours of the day, the number 12. In book called Sefer Yetzirah, it's explained this. But the 12 aspects of God, that's you take it's like how do you go factorial. 1 times 2 times 3 comes out to 12. Is that right? Is that true? No. 1 times 2. No, I'm sorry. How does it go? Let's figure this out again. No, 4 times 3. That's what it is. That's right. In fact, you go from the top to the bottom. 4 times 3, because all the way down would be 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. Right? That would make 24. But there's 2 hays in God's name. So that cuts out one set of combinations. So it's 4 times 3. That's 12. That's the 12 combinations of God. It's like taking 3 letters, Yud, Hey, and Vav, and arranging them, right? But arranging them, how are we going to do it? Yud, well, you have to look and see it. You go Yud, Hey, Vav, Yud, Vav, Hey, and then you go Vav, Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey, Yud, and then you go Vav, Hey, Vav. Oh, but there's 4 letters. That's right. Because there's 4 letters, so therefore you have to arrange the 4 letters in these 3 different combinations. That's how it goes up. Anyway, it comes out to be 12. That's the 12 different combinations of God. There's a book which is called Bnei Yisachar. And over there he explains, it probably comes from Kabbalah, from Kabbalah also, but I didn't see it. Bnei Yisachar, and he explains the different combinations of God's name, how that applies to each month. Of each month. And each month, it shines a different combination of God's name for these 12 different combinations of Yud, K, Vav, K. In Aleph, Daled, Nun, Yud, like it says in another place. And that's the Shvatim, that's the tribes, the 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 tribes, the sons of Jacob, there were 12. So Jacob is, so to speak, represents the essence of God's name. And so did Jacob and Rachel. But in the 12 tribes, that's the different aspects of God's name. That's the different permutations of God, of Yud K Vav K. Yud K Vav K, that's Yaakov. And this tribes, that's the different permutations of this name. For instance, Haruveni. What the tribes is Haruveni, Hashimoni, etc. You have Yud and then Hey. The Hey and the Yud are attached to each name. Hashimoni. That there is in every name Yud K. In each one of these 12 tribes. So that's what it means, Eila Shmot. These are the names of the Jewish people, because the drawing down of God's names into the world by means of the Torah and the commandments, that's what King Solomon was hinting at when he said that the king has 60 queens. That's the Shitei Sidrei Mishnah. That's the 60 orders of the Mishnah. And each one of them is each one of the 60 included with 6. And that's the gematria of, I'm sorry. No, get back. I'm sorry. That's the 60 orders of 6, the 60 queens that King Solomon referred to. This refers to the 6 orders of the Mishnah. That's what we've got now. And each one of them contains in it another 6. That's Eila. 36. That's Eila. That's what it means. Eila Shmot B'nai Yisrael. Eila, that's the 6 times 6. That's the Mishnayot that we're talking about. That's what fixes up the Shmot, the names of God. Like it says in another place, but Eila Pekudei HaMishkan. That's the word Eila is also the 6 times 6. 6 times 6 is also connected to the Mishkan, the tabernacle that God made. With this is drawing down godliness in the world. So again, let's just make a reset over here. What God wants is to be revealed in every detail of the world. Every detail of the world. Not just to know that God exists and that if we do what God wants, we're going to go to heaven. That's not the Torah. That's not the Torah. That's true. God exists, and if we do what God says, you go to heaven. But that's not the point of the Torah at all. That's a side thing. Like we said before, it's like trying to describe what is an elephant, like the four blind people saw it all. And one person says the elephant it's like a big long hose. He just touched the nose of the elephant. It's a very major thing in an elephant. Huh? The same thing, it's a very major thing in Judaism. You do what God wants, you go to heaven. But that's not the whole of Judaism. The whole of Judaism is to fix up this physical world, every detail of it. In order to do that, you have to have all the details of the Torah, every detail. The Torah is called the body of God. So all the 613 commandments, that's the 248 limbs and the 365 arteries, it says, blood vessels. That's the Eile, means the 6 times 6. Okay, that's the same thing as connected. Also, look what it says in another place. Oh, but perish, that's the idea. Now we're getting to the answer, what we said before. That's the idea of Eile Shmot. That's what it means. These are the names of the Jewish people. The whole book of Exodus is not called Exodus, it's called names. Names of the Jewish people. The names of the Jewish people went into Egypt. What does that mean? That's talking about the time of exile. Now, it's talking about me and you right now. We're in exile. There is also Mitzrayim de Kedusha. There is also what's called Egypt in a holy way. Sometimes you can be physically in Egypt. That's what the Jewish people were there. And you can also be spiritual in Egypt. That's what we are now. Holiness is concealed. Like it's learned in the Kuti Torah, another place in the Garon. We talked about the God's, it says the throat of God. That's Mitzrayim, is the narrow place between the head and the heart. The head is wide and the heart is wide, but the throat is very narrow. Narrow. That's the idea of Paro. Paro is the same language as Orif. Orif is the back of the neck. And Egypt is called Meitzar Hagoron. Meitzar is the narrow place. That's Mitzrayim. Meitzar is the narrow place of the throat. How the throat comes, Lashon Meitzar. Namely, Mitzrayim is the language of Meitzar. The level is concealment and hiding. You're doing, it's known that in the time of exile, it's written, we don't see any signs of God. Perish Otiot, we don't see, what does it mean? The signs of God. We don't see the names of God. Sha'anu Mamshichim, we draw down by means of Torah and prayer. We don't see that it's not revealed by us. It's not revealed by us. It's all concealed. Right? Because sometimes you can see the biggest miracles in the world and you don't see that it's a miracle. It doesn't seem like it's a miracle, right? I just take a very simple example. We've talked about this before. The Hamas and this, our enemies, since October 7th, a little more than a year ago, they've shot over 25,000 missiles into Israel. 25,000. Each one of those missiles has the power to kill, I don't know, 100 people, 500 people. Unfortunately, there have been people that have been killed, but after 25,000 missiles, there's only been killed by the missiles, I don't know, 5 people, 10 people, some, which each one of them is also a tragedy. I'm not trying to minimize that. But to think, in the Iron Dome, it like stopped 20,000 of them. So there's 5,000 missiles that came in. Nobody can explain what happened. How did they stop? That's amazing miracles. That's incredible miracles. Right? And here we see in Israel that the government does nothing, that we don't really, if and someone would shoot a missile into America, anybody that would shoot a missile, officially the government would shoot a missile, they would atom bomb the whole place. What's the question? And here is we don't do anything. We have the worst government in the world, and here we are. We have electricity, we have water, we have this. Amazing. And the worst enemies, the worst government, the worst conditions, we're in the worst position, and God protects us. Amazing miracles, but we don't see that it's a miracle. We just take it for granted. It says that's the exile. That's what it's called. We're in exile. We don't attribute anything to God. Hainu, namely, and really we should attribute everything to God. Hainu, lefi shein, because mitalmin, they're concealed in Mitzrayim. We are now in Mitzrayim. And that's what it means. The names of the Jewish people that went into Egypt, we brought these names into Egypt to fix the world up, to fix up the world. Makom Tsar, like King David did. Masha'en, that's the idea of Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael, spiritually, is Eretz Tova Rachava. This is revealed godliness. So that's the idea of the future redemption. It can't be done just by means of bringing the Jews. If you bring all the, you can't. First of all, only Moshiach is going to bring all the Jews into Israel. But if you brought all the Jews into Israel, it would be basically the same thing as bringing all the Jews into Chicago or any other place. Until the Jews start doing the Torah and the commandments, and that makes Israel a holy place. You see, it's revealed. Right? Everyone in the world will start to realize. As soon as there's one person in the world that doesn't know about what Hashem is, so we're in exile. We're in exile. And it doesn't make any difference where Jews live or what Jews do, as long as all the Jewish people are not doing Torah and commandments, and because they feel godliness, then we're in exile. That's what's called exile. And that's what it means, bringing the names into Egypt. That's the godliness potential of the Jewish people. We bring it into Egypt in order to fix up Egypt. Why does it say 2 times? Right, we learned that before. That was the question we started off with. As God willing, we'll deal with that tomorrow. Remember, we had in the beginning of this mimer, we had a question: why does the language of the Jewish people going into Egypt change from Parshas Vayigash? 2 weeks ago, it says the same thing, that the Jewish people went into Egypt, and it says Yaakov and his sons. And here in this week's Torah portion, it just repeats it with a little bit of change of language. Why does it repeat it, and why is the change of language? That, God willing, we'll deal with tomorrow. Now let's do the Devar Malchut.